Welcome to Conversations with HJM. I'm Lisa Harris-Jones.
And I'm Tommy Tompsett.
And today we have Chief of Staff to the Governor Moore's administration, Fagan Harris. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You were raised in Bowie, Anne Arundel County, public schools, went on to Stanford, Oxford, Rhodes Scholar, graduated with honors, and then came back to Maryland and started organizations like Baltimore Corps, where you focused on training and the hiring of people that needed jobs. And how have you taken all of that experience and brought it into the Moore administration?
Well, thanks again for having me. I'm so happy to be here. My background is as a social entrepreneur. And so prior to this role, what I've spent my entire career doing is building things, and particularly building things with the talent and human capital lens. And if you think about the beginning of this administration, it's basically a startup. Like, we had to go assemble the most talented, diverse, dynamic team in the country. We had to hit the ground running with lightning speed. And so all of that training of recruiting the very best, building a culture that brings out the very best. I think a thing that a lot of folks maybe lose sight of is that the governor was a private citizen before this. He wasn't a sitting mayor. He wasn't a sitting congressman. He wasn't a U.S. senator. He was in the private sector. And he raised his hand one day and said, you know what? I want to run for the highest office in the state because I believe I can make a difference and I can change things. And so we had to build a whole apparatus around him from the ground up. And so it was very much like a startup where we had to get the right people on the bus, get them in the right seat, get the bus moving in the right direction. And so that training as a social entrepreneur, that background of building new things, was useful.
Diversity is very important to this administration, and you can see that, as you noted, by the team that the Moore Miller administration put together with the cabinet, with people of color, with women. Tell me a little bit more about that.
We've assembled the most diverse and dynamic administration in Maryland history. It was really important to the governor that we built a team that looked like Maryland, that reflected the full breadth and depth of experiences across the state. We did that for several reasons. Number one, I think it's very important for everyone to look at the administration and see themselves in the administration. The government is an exercise in public service, and it's important for public service to mirror the public. And so that absolutely was a North Star from the very beginning. I think the second point that's as important is that diversity drives over time the best ideas. And the governor is someone who is leading in a different way. This administration is moving at a different pace. It's taking on challenges that for a long time we've not confronted as a state, which means we got to bring our A game. We got to bring the very best ideas, and we've got to make sure that we're governed by ideas, not provincial thinking, not who knows who, but actually bringing the very best ideas to the biggest challenges. And so having a diverse administration where we benefit from the lived experiences, from the different professional backgrounds, we're getting people who are really best in class at what they do, has been absolutely indispensable, I think, to the early success of the administration.
So one of the big ideas of Governor Moore is winning the decade. What does that mean for Maryland, and how do we accomplish that?
Sure. It means three things. Number one, we've got to build an economy that is equitable and competitive. When you look over the last 8 years, I think Maryland's missed a lot of opportunities to get moving on industries of the future. Quantum computing, AI, renewables, doubling down on our incumbent strengths. We're obviously the marvel of the world when it comes to healthcare and higher education. We have one of the most dominant ports and logistics infrastructures on the planet. And yet, in some ways, we could do so much more to unleash them and to bridge to industries that are going to create more jobs and drive labor force participation. These are all metrics that have really struggled over the last 8 years. We've seen a lot of workers drop out of the Maryland workforce, while regionally those around us are adding workers and adding population. Last couple of years, GDP growth has actually been flat, which means that Maryland's falling behind relative not just to our neighbors, but to the country. So when we win the decade, we've got to get Maryland moving. We've got to make an economy that's ready to seize the opportunity that's in front of us. Second, we got to deal with public safety. It is honestly probably our most significant responsibility for those of us in public service, is to make sure that our communities are safe. Part of that is getting the most violent offenders off the street. Part of that is creating opportunity pathways through our service year, reaching young people who need that first rung of the ladder of opportunity so that they can build a better life for themselves and their families. And then third, we've got to invest in our infrastructure. We need broadband across this state. We need transit across this state. We need to connect Marylanders to one another. We need to connect Marylanders to opportunities. We need to connect Marylanders to a future that they want to be a part of here in Maryland.
So now we have a sense of what winning the decade is. So are there global priorities that go along with that, and how is the governor going to implement those global priorities?
I think it's important to start with the fact that we need to be a partner to the legislature and that we've got a lot of core mandates that need to be implemented. Climate Solutions Now Act, the blueprint. We've had an extraordinary amount of leadership from the legislature over the last 8 years, and now they have a partner in this governor. And so over the next year, we need to look really hard at those mandates and make sure that we're implementing them well. Second, we've got to make really focused investments in the things that are going to pay the biggest dividends for Marylanders, particularly as it comes to the economy. We have got to drive labor force participation. We've got to drive more dynamism and job creation. We need to reform procurement in the public sector, make it friendlier for small businesses, particularly minority-owned, women-owned, small-owned, veterans-owned. The state should be a force multiplier for the people who are building their lives, careers, and families here in the state. And I think for too long, we've been complacent. And so over the next year, we got to do everything we can to unleash the potential as a state government, as a state economy, and give Marylanders the opportunity for us to win the decade and lay the groundwork and make sure we're moving in the right direction.
Should we expect to see any legislation in 2024 related to the things that the governor is focusing on?
Yes, you will absolutely see legislation from the governor.
You're not going to tell me what it's a secret.
You know, that's something we do in consultation with our partners in the General Assembly. We're obviously thinking really deeply about the budget, really deeply about the legislative package. I can tell you that the governor is going to make really strategic investments in the future of the state and going to position this economy to seize the opportunities in front of us. We're going to continue to invest in working families. If you go back to first session, right? The governor came in, we hit the ground running. We passed 10 pieces of legislation in his absolute first session. Governor got a lot of counsel when he came in. Don't move so fast, get oriented, figure out where the bathrooms are, like you got plenty of time. But we saw that we had a unique opportunity to actually make some down payments on things that are going to pay dividends for years to come. We gave Marylanders a raise with the Fair Wage Act, with the Family Prosperity Act. We've helped lift 36,000 families out of poverty by expanding the earned income tax credit and the child care tax credit. We created a whole new government agency to create the first of its kind service year option for the entire state, which is going to help over time thousands of young people connect to their purpose and their meaning and their direction. We invested in the Innovation Infrastructure Economy Act, which is about catalyzing our potential in new industries like renewables and quantum. So we've already done a lot over the last year, and we're going to continue to do more, but we've got to stay focused on the highest leverage and opportunities. So I think that's what Marylanders can expect, that this governor is going to be laser focused on the levers that make the biggest difference for Marylanders while continuing to implement those mandates that we discussed earlier: climate, the blueprint, criminal justice reform, so on and so forth.
So we're at the Maryland Association of Counties Conference here in Ocean City. And so I know that your schedule's full. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience before we let you go?
We're here in partnership. All of the county leadership, they know what it takes to get things done for Marylanders because they live on the front line of progress. They live on the front line of a lot of the challenges that we face as a state, and we're going to need them as we navigate the year ahead. And so whether that's getting buy-in, perspective, and insight on the next legislative package, discussing the budget and some of the challenges there that we're all going to have to confront to get together at every level of government, or frankly, hearing again where those focused investments are going to make the biggest difference for Marylanders, that's the agenda. We're here because we're in partnership with these local leaders, and we need their help to help chart the path forward for Maryland.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored. I appreciate it very much.
And thank you for joining us with Conversations with HJM.